Hey, ever feel stuck and wonder why some people achieve greatness while others remain average? Join me, Mark Jean, and Beyond Average to Great as we uncover the secrets to breaking free from mediocrity and unlock the greatness within you. Through inspiring stories and insights from people who have changed their lives, you'll learn how strong decisions and bold actions can take you to the next level. Let's go. Okay, well, I am excited for our next guest. I know I say that, but I truly am, because as a kid growing up playing sports, I think it's every kid's dream that plays sports to make it into the big leagues. And not only has this guest done that, but he did so at such a high level. So let me just read a little bit about his story. So he is a towering figure in the world of sports, renowned not only for his exceptional achievements on the football field, but also his unwavering commitment to philanthropy and social causes. With a remarkable 18-year NFL career, primarily with the Kansas City Chiefs, he solidified his place in football history as the franchise's all-time leading scorer in his 14 seasons with the Chiefs. He is also a 7-time All-Pro selection, but more than that, his impact extends far beyond his athletic accomplishments. Today, his legacy continues to inspire countless individuals around the world through his tireless advocacy for philanthropy and leadership. And he has left an indelible mark on society, embodying the values of compassion, integrity, and service. As a true champion for the homeless and less fortunate, his impact transcends sports, making him a beacon of hope and inspirations for generations to come. Welcome, Mr. Nick Lowery.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be on here, my friend.
Yeah, great to have you here. I'm excited for our conversation, not only to talk about sports, but what you're doing past sports. You mentioned to me you're doing something with Alzheimer's. I have a hard time saying that, but
it's not with a T. Alzheimer's Treatment Centers of America. It's exciting because it's a wonderful connection to the work that I've done, certainly with some help from one of the great agents and philanthropists himself in sports history, Lee Steinberg. But I've hosted a number of events with people from Mayo and Barrow and Banner, and my friend who also went to Dartmouth like I did, Chris Giza, who's one of the world's premier neurologists and pediatric neurologists at UCLA. And anybody I talk to knows someone in their immediate family or close to them that has a relative or someone very close to them with dementia and Alzheimer's. My brother Chris actually died from complications during COVID from Alzheimer's. And it's a phenomenon that is only getting worse. The good news is, like a lot of things these days, a tremendous amount of innovation and some very necessary and needed, by the way, also made much more transparent from watching what happened to us all with COVID, to revamp and rethink, redream what medicine can be. And it certainly needs to change. It's certainly gotten away from the priority being the health and independent health and robust health of the individual. So Alzheimer's Treatment Centers, we're opening up our second location. Our headquarters are in Atlanta, but I work with Doug Collins and Greg Buckley, who is the CEO. We have 7 members. I think we have an 8th now from Harvard Business School. And I went to lowly Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and it uses AI combined with precision medicine. So combined with a 30-page document that AI uses at phenomenal levels of complexity, looking at hundreds of symptoms and possible causes, then edited by a team of doctors, and that becomes your first 6-month training schedule, if you will, combined with modalities which are exploding all over the place. There's a new drug called TB. I remember it because TB, Tom Brady, TB006, which is one of the few drugs that doesn't seem to have a whole lot of side effects and seems to remove the plaque in the brain, which is a huge part of causing Alzheimer's and memory loss. And so, like everything that I've been lucky enough to be involved with in my life, it's addressing a need that's not being fully addressed. And frankly, I think it can rewrite what the end of life can mean for people. Instead of the fear of not only dying, but dying without a trace of the memories that you created over a lifetime, I think it's hopefully going to help create and affirm the notion of dying with grace and with the memories that you take with you.
Yeah, my dad has dementia, and it's really interesting because he can't remember things. He gets irritated sometimes if he forgets and can't remember what he did with things. So it's really hard on my mom. And
it's hard, but it affects personality too, and it creates levels of anger and rage because you're realizing you're losing your life and you're losing the quality of your life. You're losing the color and dimension of your life.
Yeah.
And then you're losing the relationships because you literally can't remember who this person is. A very dear friend, first name Carl, I won't use his last name, one of my best friends from Dartmouth. A year and a half ago, I had dinner with him and he seemed fine. Then I had one phone call with him about 6 months ago and he seemed okay. And then I got a call from the guy named Stu Stram, Hank Stram's son. We mutually knew Carl and we were wondering what had happened to him. And I told him what I had known. I talked to him. It sounded okay, but wasn't sure really. And Stu called back 2 days later and said his niece called and said he's in a rest home. He's got full-blown dementia, possibly Alzheimer's. And he literally, Stu had asked him, how about your brother? And he said, I don't have a brother. He had two brothers. One had died, but he had one very alive brother. And think about losing the pillars, that are the fundamental structures and relationships of your life.
Yeah, that's crazy. So how did you go from sports into helping the homeless, working with youth, and now Alzheimer's?
Well, I think one of the big phrases we hear a lot of, Mark, is we are the sum of, or the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And growing up with incredible parents, father was, I only found out at his funeral that he was chief of station for the CIA when we lived in London. I knew he was senior CIA. Wow. He was a scholar on Russia and Eastern Europe. And then he became an expert also on Western Europe. But then our next door neighbor, I've been spoiled with people, not so much with, riches or anything like that, but riches in terms of education and role models. Think about what better role model could I have had growing up than great parents. My mother was in the first full class of women at Oxford. My cousin Anne Baumgartner Carl was the first woman jet pilot in 1944. No other woman flew a jet till 1960. She's in the Air and Space Museum. And my next door neighbor was Justice Byron Whizzer White, who should have won the Heisman Trophy at Colorado. 4-sport athlete, finished #1 at Yale Law School the same year he led the NFL in rushing. He led the NFL in rushing twice in the 3 years he played in the NFL, one with the Pittsburgh Steelers and one with the Detroit Lions. And he grew up with his Rhodes Scholarship. He was at Oxford, and the ambassador to England was Joe Kennedy Sr., and so Byron automatically got to know his sons, RFK, JFK, Joseph Kennedy, who was killed in a plane crash. But the second day that I was at our new home on Hampshire Road in McLean, Virginia, our next door neighbor at 6801, we were 6803 Hampshire Road, was Byron Whizzer White. And the second day, Bobby Kennedy was there in the front yard having a conversation with him, having walked 5 miles over from Hickory Hill, where the Kennedy compound in McLean, Virginia was. And those were people who spent their lives serving their country. Think about it, as a CIA officer, not being able to talk to your kids the way a farmer could about what you
Yeah.
did, your habits, your likes, your dislikes, the disciplines, the things that made your life mean something and created, a craft of some kind, an expertise. And then as a Supreme Court justice, not being able to talk about, a lot of your opinions because they might reflect on what you might decide with the Supreme Court. Those are sacrifices you made. Obviously, my dad was a reconnaissance pilot in World War II for General Patton. The last 6 months of the war, he flew 32 missions in an unarmored Piper Cub at 3,000 feet. He could see the soldiers, the German soldiers shooting at him,
Wow.
and calling in shelling, big shelling, right where he was. So that notion of service is the single missing link to the developmental access of every single young soul that's coming through school and growing into adulthood. When you learn to serve, not anything, but something that stirs your heart, your soul, it creates a tension, a healthy developmental tension of here's where I am, here's the person I want to be, here's the impact I want to have. And you create an internal magnet that
Uh-huh.
pulls you with much more force and a beautiful purpose, right, towards something that means something. And
Yeah.
how much better is our life when we have that in our in our heart.
Yeah. I love that phrase, rich in people. I think that's a phrase I'm going to use for a while because it is true. It's like the conversations we're having and even other world shakers. It's like, man, sharing information, as the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. It helps.
Proverbs 27:17.
Yep. It helps shape you and who you become. And I think that's so important because not having those conversations, for me at least, I know too much of the focus becomes pointed this way instead of being focused outward. And I think being around people like yourself, other world shakers with Tim Story, your attention can be focused outward. And who can I help? Who can I serve?
And I think you're planting your spiritual roots in soil that has fertility to it, if you will,
Yeah,
that has
yeah,
depth, deeper roots, and richer soil. So you stick with things longer because the winds of adversity don't affect you as much. By the way, speaking of winds of adversity, just a couple of weeks ago, I had a mini tornado literally come through this area, knocked out hundreds of trees. 200-foot trees right over here are now down. I had
wow,
7 or 8 of my biggest trees fell, and somehow none of them damaged the house. The roof had some shingles that are loose. I have to get that repaired. The irrigation system was pulled up, so that
was
has to be repaired, but not a single window had a crack in it. And there was a 40-foot huge piece of a tree that had flown 100 feet over here and impaled in the ground right there, 12 feet from my window.
wow,
Somehow didn't. And then I had a huge tree back over here, literally 15 feet from me, that hit the tree next to it and didn't hit the garage. It would have crushed the garage. So, talk about, I was leaning against the window. I've been watching the Olympics, and
uh-huh.
I just leaned against the window and saw this, talk about humility, to see the power of nature, 150-mile-an-hour winds just a 15 seconds do so much damage that they were
Wow.
just all up and down the street. Good morning, good evening, Arizona news truck came and knocked on my door because I had one of my trees was struck by lightning and was half of it had fallen across and completely blocked my street. And yet I really do feel very, very truly, sincerely lucky. And, I've lost some shade, but more sunlight's coming in. And that goes to how deep are your roots. The roots of
Yeah.
some of these trees were blown over easily, and others right nearby are fine. And obviously, that goes to a lot of biblical analogies.
Yeah.
Where we plant our seeds is everything. And of course, being consistent to that as well.
Now let's go back and talk about sports a little bit too, because I know sports is one of those things that is easy to see where greatness is measured just because of you see people that excel in sports. So tell me about just a little bit about your story about your journey into the NFL.
Well, I'm going to get to that, but just because it's so recent, look at what we got out of the Olympics. What I got out of the Olympics, including that night when those trees were falling down, is the American performance in track and field, obviously in gymnastics and swimming.
Mhm.
But how many of the Americans came from behind to win?
Yeah.
Whereas Sha'Carri Richardson, who'd been denied access, and so only finished second, but she'd had to have no warm up and walked around 3 miles and yet still got second. Then she comes back from 5 yards behind in the 4x100 relay and crushes everybody and even puts that look on her face as she passes by,
Oh,
like,
that was
you ain't
awesome.
going to beat me. Or that
Yeah.
was amazing, right? Then the 1500 meters, I can't remember the man's name, but he came from behind and just won.
Surprised
And
everybody.
the steeplechase came from behind and got a silver. But all of that is just this, chariots of fire,
Yeah.
that beautiful, incredible visual expression of courage, toughness, overcoming immense discomfort and pain. Now, it's an artificial analogy for life, right? Sports
Mhm.
is not the real world in many ways, but it teaches us and exemplifies and does show character. And I think what I love about whoever was coaching the American team, with the exception of the men's 4x100,
Yeah.
understood the mental toughness and the character that they were helping release under all that pressure. So, getting back to my career, why I'm so clear on this is I had a mentor. I had a great coach in Dick Johnson. I had parents that I appreciated and I came to appreciate more and more. And that stability. I didn't have an over officious father. I just had a father who was there in the stands. He was
Yeah.
just there. And that showing up on a regular basis, so many families miss, so many kids miss. And I
Yeah.
had that. And I had a coach that was spiritually coming back from his own severe challenge. He was dying literally the first day I met him, Dick Johnson. He said, 2 months ago, I was on my deathbed with hepatitis. He was 70 years old. He said, and this kid appeared I hadn't thought of in 60 years. And he's standing right there in front of me at the front of my hospital bed and said, Dick, you were always there for me when I was being bullied, when I was being beaten up every day. You were the only one that stood up for me. I'm here to tell you, you're not going to die. It's my turn to be there for you.
Wow.
That goes to the actions we take, the priorities we make in life, the choices we make can feed the best part of ourselves or they can feed the monster in
Mhm.
us. We have both. We have the angels, we have the archangel Michael looking over us. What about the monsters? And if we're not careful, we can feed the monsters and go a completely different direction. God allows us to have that choice. And one of the great things that you and I participate in with my dear, dear friend, Tim Story, and his incredible partner, Joseph, surrounding ourselves with people like you and all the other great people, Mike Nicholas, and, just all the
Stigma.
incredible people that are part of that help bring out the angels, bring out the better choices,
Yeah.
reconciling and wrestling with very difficult ethical challenges. And right now, it's more difficult than ever because if ever there was a perfect expression of what the Bible talks about with the devil creating doubt, it
Mhm.
is AI, which can be just like the phone. It can be God and it can be the devil at the same time. AI creates these opportunities to make it almost impossible to figure out what's actually true.
Yeah.
So we better look to the Bible. We better look to principles that don't change.
Yeah.
We better know what our true compass is, true north, etc., or else we will be lost.
So now going back to football, so you played at Dartmouth. and you were a place kicker at Dartmouth. So how did you go from college into pro? I want to hear that story because I've heard you tell it before,
Well,
and it's really a great story.
it's the interesting thing. You really realize how much there is the fear of failure and the confrontation of having had and held dreams of being the next Michael Jordan, or in my case, maybe it was Jan Stenerud, and then realizing I had a chance and being cut by the Jets, and then showing up on the doorstep of the Patriots, kicking lights out, and them signing me because their kicker had an injury. And my very first game was on national TV, the very first Sunday night game with the Monday night crew of Don Meredith, Howard Cosell, and Frank Gifford against the Oakland Raiders, but not just the hated Oakland Raiders, who became just as hated when I played for the Chiefs, but a month after Darryl Stingley, their outstanding receiver, was paralyzed by a vicious but legal hit by Jack Tatum. And we're going back to that same stadium, and the whole team, we came out not the day before, but 2 days before, so the team would have a chance to see Darryl in the hospital. So talk about an intense game. And I realized then how far I had to come, because I was scared. You can read between the lines, scared, you know what, Les. And the coach, Chuck Fairbanks, came up to me before the game and said, just be yourself. And as I look back, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was capable of. I knew that I wanted to put myself in those frightening situations, because for those of you that are watching, place kicker is arguably the most intense position in sports for its 1.3 seconds of, and for its 1 minute when you're running out, lining up a kick. Everybody's watching. Nobody cares what your excuses are. The goalposts that are 18 feet wide look like they're tweezers, and all you can do is marshal your capacity to focus and then release and get it done. And that took time. And so what was the spiritual, emotional muscle was knowing the only way I could do it was to not give up and keep coming back and back and back and keep doing it until I got comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to share it with you right now. I'm very talkative today, which is, I guess, not unusual, but okay. I'm going to share with you just an interesting analogy for those of you searching for that feeling. And I interviewed, when I talked to, I had a show on Sirius Satellite for 121, 800 shows on Channel 121. And Virginia Wade, who was a star tennis player, but never seemed to win at Wimbledon in front of the Queen. And Phil Mickelson, he always finished second or didn't quite have it. When they had their breakthrough moments, mm-hmm. It felt, they both said the exact same phrase. It felt like it was my own birthday party. So we have to hang in there so long that we get comfortable that these challenges become our own birthday party. Hold on one quick second, please. Sorry.
Okay.
And that takes time. And I went from being scared to, after 11 rejections by 8 different teams, including the Washington Redskins, my hometown team, including times when clearly I was out kicking everybody, but it not being the right time, I finally was at a point where I'd given up. Mm-hmm. I'd given up, and I'd taken a job, as I'd been before, as a legislative aide in the United States Senate. So another very difficult job to get. And I'd worked for Senator John Chafee of Rhode Island. I grew up in D.C., and that was my major at Dartmouth, mm-hmm. Government. And I loved it. It was, again, about service. And I took a permanent job with the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee with Senator Bob Packwood, working on the Olympic boycott for the first 2 weeks, because Jimmy Carter had declared, because of Afghanistan being invaded by the Russians, that they would boycott the Olympics. And after that, I worked on aviation safety and deregulation. And it was a great job. They were all attorneys but me. And then I got a call out of the blue from the Kansas City Chiefs. I had 2 other contracts from the Baltimore Colts and the Cleveland Browns, but I just thought, nah, I'm ready to move on. But something told me to try one last time. And I literally told the general manager for the Chiefs, thanks, and hung up on him. And yet something kept eating at me. It just, that's how close it came to never playing another, again.
Wow.
And Dick Johnson, that same mentor who brought out those great things in me by reminding me what his journey had become by being visited by a kid he hadn't thought of in 60 years because he didn't give up on that kid, and that sense of karma, that sense of what we bring out in others, we get back. And I traced back to his hospital room where this guy, the general manager for the Kansas City Chiefs, Jim Schaaf, had back surgery. There was no internet, didn't have his phone number, didn't know how to spell his name, but
Wow.
I did detective work and found him. And we talked for an hour. They flew me in. They gave me a $2,500 bonus, which is nothing today, but these were just signs that I'd never received a bonus before. And they were going to bring me in 3 months early. That had never happened before. So even though, Mark, I was signing up, giving up a great job. You don't lose your job if your senator loses their job in a campaign when you're on a committee. You keep your job. But I gave up that job to try one last time. And that was to go against my idol, Jan Stenerud, who became the first kicker in the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And on the outside, people would say, you're stupid, you're crazy, what are you doing? You're a loser. You've been rejected 11 times. Now you've got a great job and you're going to pass that up. And yet I knew that I'd paid my dues so much that I didn't feel any guilt competing and saying, I'm going to take this guy's job. I'm going to earn it. And then I'm going to earn it every year after that for 18 years and become the most accurate kicker in NFL history, with the most 50-yarders in NFL history, with the most field goals in NFL history, and to set the record back in Washington in the Redskins Stadium against the world champion Redskins 3 years later with the longest field goal ever at RFK Stadium and the longest field goal ever in the first quarter of an NFL game. And there are many other accomplishments too, none of which would have happened if I'd given up. But as we started this conversation, it was really about being surrounded by people that helped me learn those lessons and then apply them, so I knew how rich they were, and I could stay with it until it was my time. It wasn't my timing; it was always God's timing.
So, how do you turn off those naysayers or those voices in your head that are saying, "Oh, you shouldn't do this. You can't accomplish this," to stay focused on your dream?
Well, they don't know how to kick a field goal. They don't know how you're training. And the more you do something, I mean, it really is true. Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, talks about the theory of 10,000 hours, that when you stay with something that much and you're that passionate and you're that creative, you don't just do the same thing, you keep learning, you get to a point where there's a beautiful fusion of both your physical ability with your mental and emotional abilities, so that you stop being quite so self-conscious. It's in your DNA. It's transferred into a sort of beautiful acceptance by your body, your mind, your soul of this craft. And that is, I think, when we are thanking, if you will, God, Jesus, for giving us these skills so that we have something that can truly help others as well. That's the key. It's never forgetting, in the midst of a narcissistic environment in sports, and in general, America's narcissistic media climate, that it's always God's gift, that we are this vessel to use it to create more space for others to discover their own beautiful gifts.
Yeah. Speaking of that, there's a quote that I want to read you from a call we were on together with Roger Clemens. He says, "When you're good, you tell everybody, but when you're great, everybody tells you." So what does that quote mean to you?
What that quote means to me, hopefully will really help, given how much talking I've been doing, which is shut up and be great.
Yeah.
Be so good with your work ethic and with your performance that it speaks for itself. Marv Levy, who would go on to a Hall of Fame coaching career with Buffalo, and he was a very good coach with us, but he got even better 4 years later with Buffalo. He would say, what you do speaks so loudly they can't hear what you're saying. And I remember before my 1990 season, I'd had my worst year the year before and had 4 different holders and just hadn't played well. It was Marty's first year, and I knew at 34 that they were going to look for a reason to replace me, even though I was still the most accurate kicker in NFL history. And I just remember saying, I'm going to be so good that Marty's going to get on his knees and beg me to stay. That sort of attitude. I'm going to be so good, I don't have to say anything. And to me, that is it right there. Be so good, you don't have to say anything.
That's amazing. Also on the call, Pastor John Jenkins said, good
Yeah.
says serve me, great says serve others. And I love that because when you're showing when you're pursuing greatness, you are doing that. If you're part of a team, you're doing that to help your team win, to help others win, to help others be successful. So I love that. That's great. So tell me more about some of so after football, you went into like serving and helping others. How was that something that was always a passion of yours, or
Yeah, it
how?
wasn't after football, it was during football. I started Kickwick for cerebral palsy with Lee Steinberg helped me get going. And my aunt had cerebral palsy. I could honor my father's sister who got her college degree and became a beautiful writer and a
Mhm.
college librarian at the University of Utah. And she wrote a lot like Ernest Hemingway, just incredible.
Wow.
Hoping to get her book published, by the way. And from there, it just was, I thought, disability translates for all of us in different ways that are meaningful. Because in
Mhm.
the end, I think God gives us a disability. In the Bible, there's the thorn in our side that
Yeah.
teaches us that we feel pain, we feel discomfort, but that also teaches us the most. And so I started to think, everybody has disability, and that unites us as human beings. And so each one of the different things I started, which the next one was called Adult Role Models for Youth, or Army, and became Youth Friends. We grew from 300 volunteers at the YMCA and all the youth serving agencies in Kansas City, serving 3,000 kids, to 3,000 volunteers working with all the inner city kids in Kansas City. And then Native Vision, which was on Oprah, started that with the NFL Players Association. My best friend's wife, Allison Barlow, is the program director for Johns Hopkins Center for American Indian Health. And we started a football camp, which now is in its 28th year. Every one of those things was beautiful. Launching AmeriCorps in 93 in the White House in the offseason, in 89, helping H.W. Bush in the Office of National Service. And H.W. Bush created the first Office of National Service because he believed that noblesse oblige, to whom much is given, much is expected. And the Points of Light Foundation was that. And then 4 years later, AmeriCorps, the domestic Peace Corps, the Kennedy-esque vision of asking not what your country can do for you, asking what you can do for your country. All those things, they just feed this engine. And now Champions for the Homeless, it's just more and more beautiful, more sublime, being able to, at a very, very individual level, being able to look somebody in the eye who's going through a private and public hell and say, how you doing?
Yeah.
What's your name? Where you from? And just them knowing that you really are seeing them. I get emotional because it's such a beautiful thing for me to experience, because that's that birth of something beyond ourselves that connects us in a very deep way. And I see people with so much grace and gratitude that have nothing, and yet they have daily peace, daily grace, daily gratitude. And how humbling is that for us that have, something goes wrong and our hair is not, we have a bad
Yeah.
hair day or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and how trivial it is, and how much we have the capacity to be grateful for God's gifts and doing something with that is the music and the magic together.
Yeah. There's a homeless shelter in Santa Monica that we used to go to and sing Christmas carols every year, every Christmas. And one year we went and sang and played some Christmas carols, and this one guy came up and said, "Hey, I play saxophone? Can I sit in with you guys?" And you don't know what to expect in a homeless shelter, or someone that says they play
Right.
saxophone. and he got up there and he started playing with us, and we both just like my friend and I that were leading these Christmas carols and songs were just amazed. And come to find out, having a conversation with him afterwards, he toured with several big R&B bands and artists in the 70s and 80s. Had gotten in a car wreck at some point and got hooked on painkillers, and he said it just ruined his life. And
Yeah.
just having that
Yep.
conversation, getting to know him and getting to know people, because a lot of times they're just individuals like us that just, for whatever happened, and changed their life, and they're trying to get back on track. And so I really admire that in you, that you have such a heart, and I can see that for homeless and for
Thank
misfortune
you.
and
But the
underprivileged.
gift is also, Mark, it's sort of like you and music, playing an instrument is your intuition, you know, your capacity to not even have to think anymore, to be in the flow of life
Hmm.
is beautifully enhanced. And it is a gift, and it's also a talent. It really is. If you're doing it for the right reasons, it just blossoms in your intuition, and you become less self-conscious. What's the opposite of self-conscious? Right? It's
Yeah.
outwardly aware. It's the opposite of self-conscious. I would guess is a deeper empathy.
Hmm.
And please, somebody tell me what's the downside of having more empathy.
I can't think of any. I mean, it's to me, when I've had those moments in my life, I want to share that with others. Meaning, if somebody's blessed me with something or treated me a certain way, I want to do the same for others. I want to try to make someone smile. I want to be kind. Just sometimes those little acts of kindness, opening the door for someone that might have their hands full trying to walk through, get into a building. Just those little acts of kindness, I think are missing in society today.
I think being intentional, and just definitely when I see an older person who's by themselves, like
Yeah.
our society is so terrible with treating elderly. We're so uncomfortable, again, with, I think, an extension of that fear of death, reminding ourselves, oh no, look, they're older.
Yeah.
And just saying, how are you? What's going on? Who
Yeah.
knows how that's going to make a difference? But it also, once again, it becomes feeding the monster or feeding the angel.
Hmm.
And being intentional that way keeps us on the right path.
Well, I tell you, you've impacted me in this conversation to be more aware, because in LA, it's probably the homeless capital of the world. We pass homeless people driving or even walking sometimes in the neighborhoods. So,
100,000 homeless in LA. And, I am, the competitive side of me comes out
mhm,
because I want to challenge the people in LA and California to do better. You can do better. And I tell you what, we have accomplished. We can always do better ourselves. All of us can always do better. But we have created more of a human face in Phoenix by simply helping the media see that each one of these people has their own story. Not all of them are drug addicts. Not all of them have mental health issues. And by the way, there are a billion different complex versions of what you might call mental health. And if you and I were on the street for 6 months and it's 118 degrees at 8 p.m. on the
yeah,
concrete in downtown Phoenix, you'd probably have some level of what I call situational mental health
yeah,
issues. And so, but now in Phoenix, as an example, 91,000 people were evicted last year out of 5 million. That's almost a quarter million people,
wow.
maybe more, that were temporarily desperate and homeless.
Mhm.
And so by having the media say these are people too, and letting them tell their own story, and that's what's so great is this has happened now. I've done 60. This will be our 69th event on September 22nd. We had our last one called Christmas in July on July 28th. And, how articulate they are,
Yeah.
intelligent. It just explodes, the stereotypes that really are just sort of a mildly cowardly response, reflex all of us have, because we're very uncomfortable seeing this person, oh, but they made horrible decisions, as opposed to seeing them as an individual with an individual complex path. Very often, an injury, a medical issue, certainly an addiction to painkillers, and then a financial desperation as well.
Yeah, man, you've moved me just from this conversation, and so I appreciate that. And I definitely am going to be more aware of when I pass homeless people, just to say hi, ask them their name, and just greet them.
That's the biggest gift. I mean, I try to have a $5 bill when I can, come up to a stoplight, and people will say, oh, well, they're just going to spend it on alcohol or whatever. And my thing is, I say, hey, how are you? How's your day? Who knows how that may or may not change them, but it makes me feel it's also a gift to myself, right?
Yeah.
Say, I can do something. I'm lucky enough to afford to be able to do it. Not everybody can. And that's the choice I make.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to be mindful of your time as well. I'm so grateful for you. Just to kind of close us out, since we are talking about greatness, and that's the podcast. So what does greatness mean to you?
Greatness to me is having a dream and sticking with it for a generation or more. When we do that, Champions for the Homeless is in its 18th year. Native Vision's in its 28th year. Kick with Nick lasted 16, 17 years till I finished playing. You take social capital to a new level. Harvard calls it social capital because it's beyond words. It's a new reality, existing being or energy or asset in the community that was not there before. So greatness is not only having the vision and the desire to do something great, but to stick with it when it's ugly, when it's uncomfortable, when it doesn't seem to make sense, and sticking with it until it has its own life, a life of its own. That becomes greatness, because that teaches everybody around you something as well as yourself. And again, it creates these generations of skill sets that help you in everything else in life. I do want to say, for those that are interested, just Google Champions for the Homeless, Nick Lowery, or just Champions for the Homeless, and go to nicklowery.com, NICKLOWERY.com. If you'd like to contribute, we'd love it. It's a write-off. It's a 501c3. We work with St. Vincent de Paul. But just take a look at the people. We have lots of people in the videos, the news stories, and then God will lead you where you need to go with that.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's perfect, because I was going to ask you how we can get in contact with you. So I'll make sure that we post that along with the video and the audio. So Nick, thank you so much for your time. I'm so grateful for you. Great getting to spend time with you and get to know you and your heart and your passion. Hopefully we can catch up again live and in person when you're out this way, if I make it out to Phoenix.
You got it. I'm working on a special guest to succeed Roger Clemens for our next Tuesday, a week from today, our next World Shakers Cafe.
I can't wait. Hey, thank you for joining us today on Beyond Average to Great. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to show your appreciation is by subscribing to our show and sharing it on your social media channels. Don't forget to tag me when you do. We'll see you on the next episode. Until then, remember, be great.